Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! In the solitary confines of his kitchen, illuminated by the early morning sun, Ian found himself transfixed by an enigmatic envelope, its pristine white surface standing out against the shadows that danced across the countertop. This was no ordinary parcel, Ian realized, as he cradled his coffee mug and approached the counter with cautious curiosity. His wife Sarah's handwriting leaped out at him, an intimate reminder of her presence even as she rushed off to work, with a note that both intrigued and puzzled him. "A happy anniversary to you, my love. Your destiny awaits within, a secret long overdue for its unveiling." With his heart racing, Ian placed his coffee aside and gingerly picked up the envelope. As he did, a wave of anticipation washed over him. His fingers trembled slightly as they traced the crisp edges, eager to unveil the mystery his beloved Sarah had left behind. He slid his finger under the flap and carefully opened it, pulling out 2 glossy tickets. His eyes widened as he read the text.
DragCon. Celebrate the art of transformation.
Ian's heart raced. He'd always been fascinated by drag culture, but had never dared to explore it himself. Now, holding these tickets, he felt a mix of excitement and anxiety coursing through him. When Sarah returned home that evening, Ian was waiting with a glass of wine and 1,000 questions. "So, what do you think?" Sarah asked, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. Ian took a deep breath. "I'm intrigued, but also nervous. I've never been to anything like this before." Sarah smiled warmly. "That's why I thought it would be perfect. You've always been so supportive of my interests. I wanted to do something to support yours." Ian's cheeks flushed. "I don't know if I'd call it an interest exactly. Maybe not yet," Sarah said, taking his hand. "But I've seen the way you watch RuPaul's Drag Race, the way your eyes light up when we pass by drag shows. I thought this might be a chance for you to explore that world a little more." Ian nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Thank you," he said softly. "This means more to me than you know." The next few weeks flew by in a flurry of anticipation. Ian found himself researching drag culture, watching tutorials, and even practicing with some of Sarah's makeup when she wasn't home. He told himself it was just to prepare for the convention, but deep down, he knew it was more than that. Finally, the day of DragCon arrived. Ian's stomach was in knots as they approached the convention center. The building was awash in rainbows, glitter, and larger-than-life posters of drag queens in elaborate costumes. "You okay?" Sarah asked, squeezing his hand. Ian nodded, swallowing hard.
"Yeah, just overwhelmed."
They made their way inside, and Ian's senses were immediately assaulted by a riot of color, sound, and energy. Drag queens of all shapes and sizes strutted past, their sky-high heels clicking on the polished floor. Booths lined the walkways, selling everything from wigs to corsets to false eyelashes that looked like they could take flight. As they wandered through the convention, Ian found himself relaxing. The atmosphere was electric, but also welcoming. No one batted an eye at him, a seemingly ordinary man in jeans and a blue t-shirt, exploring this extraordinary world. They stopped at a booth where a statuesque queen was demonstrating makeup techniques. Ian watched, mesmerized, as she transformed a volunteer's face with expert strokes of her brush. "You want to give it a try, honey?" the queen asked, catching Ian's eye. Ian froze, his heart pounding. He looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. I don't know, Ian stammered. I wouldn't even know where to start. The Queen smiled kindly. That's what I'm here for, sugar. Everyone's got to start somewhere. Before he could second-guess himself, Ian found himself sitting in the makeup chair. The Queen, who introduced herself as Glitter Goddess, began to work her magic. Now, honey, I'm going to need you to close those pretty eyes of yours, Glitter Goddess instructed. Ian complied, his heart racing as he felt the soft brush of makeup against his skin. He could hear the bustling of the convention around him, the excited chatter of attendees, the pulsing beat of distant music. But in this moment, all that faded away. He focused on the gentle touch of Glitter Goddess's hands, the transformation he could feel happening on his face. All right, darling, you can open your eyes now, Glitter Goddess said, after what felt like an eternity. Ian's eyes fluttered open, and he gasped at the reflection staring back at him. His features had been softened and accentuated in ways he'd never imagined possible. His eyes looked larger, more luminous, framed by long, fluttering lashes. His cheekbones were sculpted and highlighted, giving his face a feminine glow. And his lips, they were full and pouty, painted a luscious shade of red. Oh my God, Ian whispered, reaching up to touch his face in disbelief. Don't you dare smudge my masterpiece! Glitter Goddess scolded playfully, swatting his hand away. What do you think, honey? Do you feel fabulous? Ian nodded, unable to find words. He turned to Sarah, who was beaming at him with tears in her eyes. You look beautiful, she said softly. Glitter Goddess clapped her hands together.
No, this is just the beginning, sugar. If you really want to experience the full transformation, you need the whole package. Clothes, wig, the works. What do you say? Ian hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Yes, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I want to try it all. Glitter Goddess's face lit up. That's what I like to hear. Come with me, darling. We're going to turn you into a queen. She led Ian and Sarah to a curtained-off area behind the booth. Racks of glittering gowns and sky-high heels lined the walls. Wigs of every color and style imaginable were displayed on mannequin heads. Now let's see, Glitter Goddess mused, eyeing Ian critically. With your coloring and that makeup, I'm thinking emerald green. Yes, that's it. She pulled a stunning emerald green gown from one of the racks. The fabric shimmered in the light, its sequins catching and reflecting every beam. Ian's breath caught in his throat at the sight of it. It's beautiful, he murmured. It'll be even more beautiful on you, honey. Glitter Goddess winked. Now, let's get you into this and find you a wig. Sarah, would you mind helping him? Or should I say, her? Sarah nodded, taking the dress from Glitter Goddess. Of course. Come on, Ian. Let's do this. Behind another curtain, Sarah helped Ian into the gown. It was a struggle at first, the fabric clinging in unfamiliar ways, but eventually they managed to zip it up. Ian marveled at how the dress hugged his body, creating curves he'd never known he had. When they emerged, Glitter Goddess was waiting with a long, wavy blonde wig. I think this will complete the look perfectly, she said, carefully placing it on Ian's head and adjusting it. Finally, she handed Ian a pair of emerald green high heels. Last touch, honey. You think you can walk in these?
Ian took a deep breath and slipped on the shoes. He wobbled for a moment, then found his balance.
I think I can manage,
he said, his voice sounding strange and unfamiliar to his own ears. Glitter Goddess led him to a full-length mirror.
Are you ready to meet your drag persona, darling?
Ian nodded, his heart pounding. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and then looked at his reflection. The person staring back at him was unrecognizable. Gone was Ian, the mild-mannered office worker. In his place stood a stunning drag queen, resplendent in emerald green, with flowing blonde hair and a face that could launch 1,000 ships.
Oh my,
Ian breathed, his hand flying to his mouth in shock. You look amazing, Sarah said, her eyes shining with pride and love. Glitter Goddess beamed. Well, honey, what shall we call this gorgeous creature? Every queen needs a name. Ian thought for a moment, then smiled.
Olivia, he said softly. Her name is Olivia.
Olivia it is, Glitter Goddess declared.
Now, Olivia, are you ready to show the world your fabulous self?
Ian, no. Olivia nodded, a surge of confidence flowing through her. I'm ready. As they stepped out of the curtained area, heads turned. Olivia felt a moment of panic, but it quickly faded as she saw the admiration in people's eyes. Drag queens and convention attendees alike stopped to compliment her, asking for pictures and gushing over her emerald green gown. Olivia found herself swept up in the excitement. She posed for photos, practiced her newly acquired strut, and even attempted a death drop, which nearly resulted in a wardrobe malfunction, much to everyone's amusement. As the day wore on, Olivia felt a sense of belonging she'd never experienced before. Here, in this vibrant, accepting community, she could be herself, or perhaps a version of herself she'd never known existed. Sarah watched her with a mix of joy and wonder. You're glowing, she said during a quiet moment. I've never seen you so happy. Olivia smiled, her red lips curving beautifully. I've never felt so free, she admitted. It's like I've been wearing a mask my whole life, and I've finally taken it off. As the convention began to wind down, Olivia felt a pang of sadness. She didn't want this day to end, didn't want to go back to being Ian. Sensing her mood, Glitter Goddess approached. Remember, honey, she said gently, Olivia isn't just a costume. She's a part of you. You can take her with you wherever you go. Olivia nodded, blinking back tears that threatened to ruin her perfect makeup. Thank you, she said, hugging Glitter Goddess tightly, for everything. As they prepared to leave, Sarah turned to Olivia. So, she said with a smile, same time next year? Olivia laughed, a sound full of joy and promise. Absolutely, she said. But why wait? I think Olivia might need to make some appearances before then. Sarah grinned and took her hand. I can't wait to see what Olivia does next. As they walked out of the convention center, Olivia's emerald green gown shimmering in the setting sun, she felt like she was stepping into a new world. A world where she could be herself in all her glittering, fabulous glory. The journey home was a blur of excited chatter and plans for the future. Olivia couldn't stop talking about everything she'd learned, the people she'd met, the experiences she'd had. Sarah listened with rapt attention, her eyes shining with love and support. As they pulled into their driveway, reality began to set in. Olivia looked down at her glittering gown, then at their modest, suburban home. "I suppose I should change before the neighbors see," she said, a note of sadness in her voice. Sarah squeezed her hand. "You don't have to, if you don't want to," she said softly. "This is who you are. If anyone has a problem with that, it's their issue, not yours." Olivia felt a surge of love for her wife. "Thank you," she whispered. "But I think I need some time to process all of this, to figure out what it means for me, for us." Sarah nodded understandingly. "Of course. Take all the time you need. I'm here for you, no matter what." They made their way inside, Olivia's heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She caught a glimpse of herself in the hallway mirror and paused, still amazed by her transformation. "You know," Sarah said, coming up behind her, "we have that spare room upstairs. It could make a great dressing room for Olivia." Olivia's eyes widened. "Really? You wouldn't mind?" Sarah shook her head. "Of course not. This is part of who you are. I want you to have a space where you can fully express yourself." Tears welled up in Olivia's eyes, threatening to ruin her carefully applied makeup. "I love you," she said, pulling Sarah into a tight hug. "I love you too," Sarah replied. "All of you." Over the next few weeks, Olivia's dressing room began to take shape. They cleared out the spare room, replacing the old futon with a vanity and full-length mirror. Sarah surprised Olivia with a clothing rack, which slowly began to fill with dresses, skirts, and blouses. Olivia spent hours in her new sanctuary, experimenting with makeup techniques she'd learned at the convention, trying on different outfits, and practicing her walk in heels. Sometimes Sarah would join her, offering encouragement and advice. Other times, Olivia relished the solitude, using the time to reflect on her evolving identity. One evening, as Olivia was removing her makeup after a particularly successful session, she heard a knock at the door. "Come in," she called, assuming it was Sarah. To her surprise, it was their neighbor, Tom. He stood in the doorway, his eyes wide, as he took in the sight of Olivia in her emerald green gown, her blonde wig slightly askew. I'm sorry," Tom stammered. "Sarah said I could come up. I didn't realize." Olivia felt a moment of panic, then took a deep breath. This was who she was now. She had nothing to be ashamed of. "It's all right, Tom," she said, her voice steady. "Come in. What can I do for you?" Tom hesitated, then stepped into the room.
"I just wanted to borrow your lawnmower,"
he said, his eyes darting around the room, taking in the dresses and wigs.
"But I can come back later if this isn't a good time."
Olivia smiled, feeling a surge of confidence. "Now is as good a time as any," she said. "Let me just slip on some shoes, and I'll show you where it is." She stepped into a pair of flats, much easier to manage than her heels, and led a bewildered Tom down to the garage. As she helped him wheel the lawnmower out, she could see the questions in his eyes. "I know this must be a shock," Olivia said gently. "It's new for me too, but this is who I am." Tom was quiet for a moment, then nodded.
"As long as you're happy," he said. "That's what matters, right?"
Olivia felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Right," she agreed. "Thank you, Tom." As Tom walked away with the lawnmower, Olivia stood in the driveway, the setting sun warming her face. She felt exposed, yet liberated. For the first time, She was showing her true self to the world outside of the safe space of the convention. Sarah appeared in the doorway, a look of concern on her face. "Everything okay?" she asked. Olivia turned to her, a broad smile on her face. "Everything's perfect," she said. I think I'm ready to be Olivia full-time." Sarah's face lit up. She rushed forward, enveloping Olivia in a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. As they stood there in the fading light, Olivia in her emerald green gown and Sarah in her casual jeans and t-shirt, they knew their life was about to change dramatically. But with love and support, they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The next few months were a whirlwind of changes and adjustments. Olivia began the process of transitioning, not just in terms of her appearance, but in every aspect of her life. She started hormone therapy, began vocal training to feminize her voice, and slowly began to introduce Olivia to her friends and colleagues. To her surprise and relief, most people were supportive. There were, of course, some who struggled to understand, who asked insensitive questions or made hurtful comments. But for every negative reaction, there seemed to be 10 positive ones. Her workplace was particularly understanding. When Olivia nervously approached her boss to explain her situation, she was met with nothing but support. They worked together to create a transition plan, including how to inform her coworkers and clients. The day Olivia first went to work as herself was both terrifying and exhilarating. She chose a conservative black dress and low heels, her blonde hair styled in a professional bob. As she walked into the office, she held her head high, despite the butterflies in her stomach. Her coworkers greeted her with smiles and compliments. Many had questions, which Olivia answered patiently and openly. By the end of the day, she felt a sense of acceptance she'd never experienced before in her professional life. At home, Sarah continued to be her rock. She helped Olivia navigate the complexities of building a new wardrobe, offering fashion advice and accompanying her on shopping trips. They laughed together over Olivia's mishaps with makeup and celebrated her successes. Their relationship evolved too. As Olivia became more comfortable in her identity, she found a new confidence that spilled over into every aspect of her life. She and Sarah discovered new ways to connect, both emotionally and physically. One evening, as they sat on their back porch watching the sunset, Sarah turned to Olivia with a thoughtful expression. "You know," she said, "I fell in love with the person you are, not the gender you presented as. Seeing you now, so happy and confident, it makes me love you even more." Olivia felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Even with all the changes?" she asked, softly. Sarah reached out and took her hand. "Especially with all the changes. You're finally being true to yourself. How could I not love that?" Olivia leaned in and kissed her wife softly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." As the months passed, Olivia's transformation continued. She grew more confident in her femininity, experimenting with different styles and looks. Her blonde hair, once a wig, was now her own, growing out into soft waves that framed her face beautifully. She became involved in the local LGBTQ+ community, finding friendship and support among others who had walked similar paths. She even started a support group for other transgender individuals in their area, using her own experiences to help others navigate their journeys. A year after that fateful day at DragCon, Olivia stood in front of her full-length mirror, adjusting the emerald green gown she'd worn on that transformative day. It still fit perfectly, hugging her curves in all the right places. Sarah appeared behind her, wrapping her arms around Olivia's waist. "Ready for the party?" she asked. Olivia nodded, a broad smile on her face. They were throwing a celebration, part anniversary party, part coming out party. Their house would soon be filled with friends, family, and members of the LGBTQ+ community who had supported Olivia throughout her journey. As guests began to arrive, Olivia felt a sense of joy and contentment wash over her. She moved through the crowd, greeting people with hugs and laughter. The woman she saw reflected in the eyes of her loved ones was so far removed from the uncertain, conflicted person she'd been a year ago. Glitter Goddess made an appearance, sweeping Olivia into a tight hug. "Look at you, honey!" she exclaimed. "You're glowing!" Olivia laughed, twirling to show off her gown. "All thanks to you," she said. "You helped me find myself." As the night wore on, Olivia found a quiet moment to slip away to her dressing room. She stood in front of her vanity, looking at the photos that lined the mirror, pictures of her journey over the past year. There she was at DragCon, at work, with Sarah, with her support group. Each image showed a woman becoming more comfortable, more confident, more herself. She heard a soft knock at the door and turned to see Sarah standing there, a loving smile on her face. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked. Olivia nodded, reaching out to take her wife's hand. "Just taking a moment to appreciate how far we've come," she said. "A year ago, I never could have imagined this life. Now I can't imagine anything else." Sarah pulled her close, resting her forehead against Olivia's. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "You've shown such courage and strength. You inspire me every day." Olivia felt tears prick at her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said. "Your love and support made all of this possible." They stood there for a moment, holding each other close. Then, from downstairs, they heard the sound of laughter and music. "We should get back to our guests," Olivia said, wiping her eyes carefully to avoid smudging her makeup. Sarah nodded, but before they left the room, she turned to Olivia with a mischievous grin. "So," she said, "what do you think about renewing our vows? This time with you in a wedding dress?" Olivia's face lit up. "I think that sounds perfect," she said, leaning in to kiss her wife. As they rejoined the party, Olivia felt a sense of completeness she'd never experienced before. She was Olivia, wife, friend, advocate, and above all, herself. The journey hadn't been easy, but standing here, surrounded by love and acceptance, she knew it had been worth every step. The emerald green gown shimmered in the light as Olivia moved through the room, her blonde hair catching the glow of the candles. She was radiant, inside and out, finally at home in her own skin. And as she raised a glass to toast to new beginnings, she knew that this was just the start of a beautiful new chapter in her life.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!